Hey, John Gilroy here. Zero Trust assumes your system has been breached. But how do you know? Today, we're going to show you how to find the needle in the haystack. Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. We have two guests today. We have Chris Howard, Vice President for Federal Sales, and Zach Vaugh, Director, U.S. Federal Security Engineering at Vectra AI. That's V as in victory, Vectra. Chris, needle in the haystack, huh? That's the problem.
Yeah, that is. In today's cyber landscape, threats are evolving every day. Malicious actors, nation-state actors are using different techniques and tools. They are not standing still. But unfortunately, a lot of our technology is not progressing at the same rate, and a lot of our defensive techniques are not changing. So it becomes a huge issue with not only identifying activities that are malicious trying to enter your network, but more importantly, once they're in and you've been compromised, what do you do then? And that is the real challenge, and that's where we come in to help address it with the Vectra AI platform.
So, Zach, let's put this in perspective, maybe frame this out like a building or something. So traditionally, I guess they'd hire John Gilroy out of college, and they'd put me in a room, and I'd look at logs all day long until my eyes got crisscrossed. So is that how you started, Zach?
Well, I think unfortunately that is the status quo that a lot of our partners in these federal agencies are facing. That is their reality, is that the tool sets that have been historically deployed are very perimeter focused. Paying a lot of attention to what's occurring from an ingress egress perspective. But the amount of data generated just by that traffic alone far exceeds the capacity for human analysts to interact with. And like you said, John, I mean, it's primarily reactive in nature. They're looking at log data that's been sent to them to try and comb through it, and you use the term finding the needle in the haystack. It's finding a needle within a stack of needles, trying to differentiate that one bad signal, that one bad actor from all of this benign data.
So, Chris, let's move around our metaphors here. I was, believe it or not, a history major, and I sure read about ancient Greece and adventures and something called the Trojan horse. Mm-hmm. And so, as you know, Trojan horse gets inside and maybe just sits there. And so it could sit there for 2 years. And so you may scan your system and go, well, Zach said it's clean. But how do you know something like that with something just sitting there? Is a behavior of it, or how do you even know?
Yeah. So and what we like to refer that to, and a lot of people do, is called living off the land. So somebody gets in there, and we've done red team exercises, and there's a lot of customers that try to identify this, where those malicious actors or nation state actors, whomever it is, insider threat type of activity, they may sit there for months or even a year. They're in no rush. Their end goal is to get something, whether it's an exfiltration of something that is pretty sensitive or taking over an identity. So once they're in there, how do you find them? Well, the tools that they go by using are generally the same. Not the tools, sorry. The behaviors that they use are the same, right? They have to open do some recon, open a C2 channel. They have to compromise identity. So when you look, you have to have a tool that can identify those successive behaviors. Just alerting on one specific anomaly is just noise, and it's going to bog down your analyst. So what you have to do to find that individual that's living off the land, eventually they're going to do something. And when you're in a position with a tool that can identify those types of behaviors, you're way ahead, because your end goal is not to be reactive. You want to be proactive and shut them down before they get to their end state goal, which is exfiltrating something. And usually that is something pretty sensitive. So, but yeah, living off the land is becoming a more common theme, and it is something that we are very good at identifying from a company perspective.
So, Zach, I was talking to a guy at NIH. And it was a casual, it was an event or something. And he says, yeah, we have 1,200 systems. I said, 1,200. And this is just the NIH. And so, well, Zach knows exactly what's going on in all 1,200. I mean, maybe this is the magic sauce. I mean, how do you, even list them? And oh, by the way, some of those are in a hybrid network. Oh, really? And that happened last week. And so this is dynamic and changing, huh, Zach? And pretty difficult.
Oh, I mean, it's an insurmountable task, honestly, John, in terms of what we're asking our cyber defenders, especially in hybrid environments like you outlined. I gave the example previously about just looking at the north-south traffic and that amount of data representing far too much from a volume perspective from a single person being able to wrap their arms around. And that's at the crux of why Vectra had developed the platform and really begun the research and development of true security-led AI, over 13 years ago. It's, here at the end of 2024, every company's touting some AI capability. And they might, right? It might be some statistical anomaly sort of detection. As Chris said, that doesn't solve the problem of finding the signal within the noise. As you just said, we've expanded now from enterprise networks to hybrid networks, infrastructure as a service, federated identity. The volume of data has only expanded exponentially. And the only way to keep pace with the speed at which attackers are moving and pivoting through these surfaces is to use a capability that truly thinks and understands the actions and activities attackers are going to take. And that is, again, at the crux of why we do what we do with security-led AI.
So, Chris, we open up by talking about logs, and maybe the next step up from log analysis, maybe something like what they call XDR or something like that. And so this is level one is level two might be XDR. Is this the progression in trying to figure out what's going on in your system?
Yeah, and XDR is an interesting term because there's a lot of different meanings, and people tout that they're complete XDR. I mean, we do play a major part in what we consider XDR offerings, but there are many different pillars to the XDR offering. You have EDR, you have the network, you have SaaS or IaaS, you have cloud-based security, you have identity. So if you can cover all of those areas, which Vectra does cover a majority of them. We partner with the industry leading EDR vendors to fulfill the EDR part because we do not do EDR. I think then you get a more comprehensive coverage because all of our customers today are utilizing on-prem hybrid cloud networks. And if you're not getting complete coverage across those entire landscapes, you're obviously missing blind spots because if an attacker comes in through the network, their goal is to pivot into some other hybrid platform, the cloud, the O365 or Entra ID from a federated identity. So they're not just sitting in one environment. They are trying to move laterally across all of your assets and figure out where the blind spots are and figure out where the best use of their time is from an exfiltration perspective. So yeah, XDR is incredibly important, but we have to be careful that we just don't, it's just like zero trust. You trust, trust and verify. Same with the vendors, because, everyone's going to tout they do something within this piece, but make sure that you're addressing all of the different levels of XDR, because there are at least, I believe, Zach, five or six components of XDR today.
Yeah. So Zach, I take notes when Chris was speaking, and I like a blip on the screen. Identity. So wait a minute, I don't think you guys is identity, but you also handle identity. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a critical piece to be able to monitor, John, because identity has probably become the premier target for adversaries to exploit by way of compromised identity, which effectively allows them to, walk in through the front door of most of these organizations. And then, as Chris had mentioned, leverage these living off the land techniques. I mean, we're talking now about legitimately credentialed and privileged user accounts that have access, broad-reaching access within these environments. And if a motivated adversary or malicious insiders leveraging that legitimately privileged account, the reach that they're able to touch is vast. And there really are very few tools that can stitch together the use and abuse of legitimately privileged activity and align it back to the original account. And like Chris mentioned, what a lot of these nation states, et cetera, are going to want to do is to piggyback off of that compromised identity and then as quickly as possible pivot into one of these hybrid surfaces. And at that point, think of them almost as like crossing state lines. Back in the early days, pre-internet, like where you'd have the police officers chasing the bad guy all the way up to the county line or the state line, and then they kind of have to stop right there and turn back.
Yeah.
Effectively, if you don't have a tool that looks across all of these different surfaces, that's really what you're left with. And you think about how our agencies are often structured in terms of the way the organizations within them reside. You've got people whose domain responsibilities are the network or cloud. And maybe they have security teams within those different components, but they're not often talking to one another. So now you've got separate surfaces with no clear delineation nor tracking or contextualization of, hey, where was the pivot point in and out? But there's also not necessarily the collaboration that needs to take place to extend that signal and actionable information to ultimately stop these things before they become, full-blown breaches.
Yeah. Chris, I want to ask about automation and 3 other questions based on that. But before we keep going, there are people who are, picking up their kids at school, listening to this podcast, or out fixing the deck or something. And so if they wind up at vectra.ai, some federal stuff there. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. We have a wealth of different documents and links to YouTube videos. There is no shortage of content. We have a number of documents that are specifically written around zero trust mapping to different federal agencies when they put out their guidelines, as well as defensive cyber operations for specifically for federal operators and analysts. So yes, there is a ton of content available.
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes. I think there's a paper on zero trust, and we opened up a zero trust, so we might as well maybe dig that a little deeper. Okay, Zach, so when I was in college, I took tennis lessons, and my coach said, hit them where they're not. I get it. Oh, so that's where you're supposed to hit the ball. I get it. Well, I think that's what the bad guys do too, So there's blind spots in security coverage. Surprise, surprise, huh?
Well, I think there's this idea of observation bias, right? Which is that areas that we know we need to be looking at get the large or the outsized portion of our attention. The inverse of that then is basically, where are you not looking? Back to your tennis coach analogy, hit them where they're not. There's been as I mentioned before, there's been so much focus on the perimeter that really once somebody is within the confines of the enterprise, and today that is hybrid, right? As we've touched upon, that is not just an enterprise network, that is comprised of SaaS components, infrastructure as a service, federated identity, all of these things. If we're not looking, and we had touched on it before too, we're really suffering from a people problem. We don't have enough people to put eyes on each one of these different surfaces and communicate with one another. So again, I'm taking back to the why of Vectra. If you can build just a tireless autonomous agent to look across all these different surfaces, glean all of the metadata, do the hard metadata traffic analysis, and then anchor these behaviors to the entities on which we're seeing them. So the servers, the services, the identities, and prioritize that for somebody. Suddenly, you flip the script on the bad guys because you've basically weaponized the entirety of your environment, turn it into a series of living tripwires. Like Chris mentioned, they're going to have to do something. The moment they begin to move, that is what triggers detections, and not just noisy detections, but detections that build a narrative and that align to the kill chain and basically tell you, oh, wait a minute, they're at this particular phase. We need to look in more closely here. And, ideally, you're triaging something that is benign out, but I guarantee you that we're going to find things that previously have gone unseen within these networks.
Well, Chris, I teased the automatic question, so here's your automatic question. So let's say we've got Vectra AI. And it detects something in real time. Mm-hmm. So then what?
Yeah, we have a prioritization engine in our GUI. We label things critical, high, mid, low level alerts. What we want people to focus on, obviously, is the critical alerts. So out of the, say, hundreds of thousands of hosts or assets that we're looking at, we may show you, just hypothetically, 10 critical alerts. That is where we elevate that up to your analysts, and your analyst knows exactly where to start digging in. We're not saying don't look at the high alerts, but start with the critical and work your way down. Right now, today, what they do in most cases is they get 50,000 alerts in a day. 99% of them are just noise. They're just different. They're not bad. No. It does, different doesn't mean bad, but that is where they're consuming the majority of their time. And while they're being reactive and looking at the noise, if there is a true malicious intent or activity going on, it can easily be missed. Because once again, as Zach said, it's we're not calling people bad. It's just a human cannot keep up at the pace at which these things are occurring on a daily basis. So if you have the AI and the machine learning in there that's doing the hard work for you and presenting to you things that we truly believe are malicious with intent, and we give you the narrative behind it to really research and dig into it, you can stop these activities before they happen. 100%.
Yeah. May I expand on that a little bit too, John? So building on what Chris had just mentioned, being able to take that actionable signal has really allowed a number of our partnered agencies to expand on their journey of automation or semi-automated response. So when you have higher fidelity signal, you can act with more confidence, in some cases automate with more confidence some of the next steps like you were asking about. So our platform is natively integrated into things like ServiceNow, Jira, et cetera, the workflows that these agencies already have put in place to be able to maintain their change control process, grab all of the necessary artifacts relative to the investigation that they're normally manually performing, like Chris mentioned, all of that aligning to that workflow and taking those next steps, whether it is further investigation with additional tooling or automated response via SOAR platform. All of these things exist out of the box with the Vectra solution.
So, Zach, I did some research this morning. I found out your company has 35 patents. I mean, that's a whole lot. One patent, believe me, I know how hard that is. And so with all these patents you have and all the smarts, what about the federal government has certain sensitive areas, maybe the intelligence community, and they may use encrypted command and control channels. So do you draw the line there, or where do you draw the line?
No. I mean, we're fully committed through the entire all the way to the executives within the company of aligning and supporting our federal partners. So we've taken a number of steps to ensure that we're able to operate in completely disconnected environments without the need to do any kind of break and inspection for their encrypted traffic. They encrypted that traffic for a reason. To not be burdensome in terms of having to deploy additional endpoints or agents. All of the kind of the table stakes in terms of the FIPS 140-2 encryption compliance, et cetera, coming next year, being able to offer a FedRAMP accredited solution for the agencies that have that requirement. So no, very sensitive to the requirements that the government needs to be able to meet from a controls process perspective. I don't think that you'd find anybody that takes it more seriously than Chris and myself. But I mean, that extends all the way, like I said, through the executives of the company.
Yeah.
So real important question for Chris here. So when you get your FedRAMP next year, are you going to invite me to the party?
Absolutely. You'll be the first.
Big deal.
You'll be the first invite, I promise.
Yeah, this is like 5 patents. I mean, I know that's hard. I mean, I have a friend who's a patent. It was a pain. It was like going to the dentist. It was terrible. But FedRAMP is tough, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long process. It requires a lot of investments from the company and the government. It takes a long time, but obviously we see the benefit of it. I mean, even though we have an on-prem product and we work in disconnected environments for customers that have no cloud capability, half their environments, 3/4 of their environments, or sometimes 100% of their environment is in the cloud. So having that FedRAMP support is vital to our continued growth, success, and our continued ability to help our customers find, as we said in the beginning, that needle in the haystack. So yeah, 100%.
Maybe just kind of closing the loop on the topic, like you started speaking about the patents, John. I mean, so much of that resides in the differentiated, security-driven, data science partnered approach that Vectra takes, as opposed to anybody else in the industry. So we start by defining via the security researchers, what does bad look like? Not what a lot of other people will do, which is, hey, let's take a math-led approach. Let's figure out what's different in your environment. Like Chris already said. Different is different. Different does not necessarily mean bad. When you have solutions that are using math-led approaches, that's all they're going to tell you is, hey, this is different, this is different, this is different. The onus then falls to you to find the bad within that different. We flip it 180 degrees different, in the other direction. Start by defining the problem statement, identifying what bad looks like, and then tamp down via some of the AI and ML processes that work within the platform to dampen a lot of the noise of different. But a lot of those patents, those are around very specific, unique approaches that Vectra has taken to uncovering that signal, that needle within the stack of needles that everybody else is going to miss.
Well, this has been a great discussion on, I guess, noise to signal ratio. Maybe that'll be the title of this interview. It's been a lot of fun. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guests, Chris Howard, Vice President, Federal Sales, and Zach Vaugh, Director, U.S. Federal Security Engineering at Vectra, Vectra AI.